Why are former players suddenly speaking out, and why does it feel like something bigger is about to unfold? Because this isn't just another off-season story. It started with a few comments, quick reactions that most people would normally scroll past, but this time it hit differently. The tone felt sharper, more personal, and almost immediately fans picked up on it. Something didn't feel random. Now, to be clear, nothing has been officially confirmed. There's no statement from the team, no direct explanation tying everything together. But there's been a growing buzz online with fans connecting dots and asking the same question. Why now? Because when former players start talking, especially in a way that feels unfiltered, it usually means something caught their attention. And once those comments started circulating, the conversation didn't stay small. It spread fast. People started revisiting past situations, old decisions, moments that didn't make sense at the time but suddenly feel more important now. And the deeper you look, the more it feels like this might not be about just one comment or even one season. It might be about a pattern. And that's where things get interesting. Because if there really is something more going on beneath the surface, something fans are only just starting to notice, then what we're seeing right now might just be the beginning. And if that's true, what comes next could be a lot bigger than anyone expected. It started with a comment that most people weren't expecting, and it spread faster than anyone thought. Because when Elijah Wilkinson spoke out, it didn't sound like your usual off-season chatter. It wasn't polished, it wasn't careful, it felt direct, almost like frustration slipping through in real time. And fans noticed immediately. At first, it looked like just another reaction online, a former player giving his opinion, maybe venting a little. That happens all the time, but this felt different. The wording, the tone, the timing, it all caught attention. And once people started paying attention, everything escalated. Replies started piling up. Fans began digging deeper, bringing up past moments, past decisions, and connecting them to what was just said. Suddenly, it wasn't just about one comment anymore, it became a conversation. A loud one. Now, to be fair, we don't know the full context behind those remarks. There's no official explanation, no detailed breakdown of what led to it, but that hasn't stopped the speculation from growing. Because when a player says something that's strong, even indirectly, it creates curiosity. People start asking questions. Was this just frustration? Was it based on something behind the scenes, or is it hinting at something bigger that fans haven't fully seen yet? That's where the story really starts to build. Because once one voice speaks up, it opens the door for others. And even if no one else says anything directly, the silence itself can feel loud. Fans start reading into everything: interviews, past games, coaching decisions, trying to piece together what might be going on. And that's exactly what's happening here. There's been a wave of reactions, with some fans agreeing, others pushing back, and many just trying to understand what this all means. Some believe it's being blown out of proportion. Others think it's a glimpse into something that's been building quietly for a while. But regardless of which side people are on, one thing is clear. This isn't being ignored. Because moments like this, unexpected, unfiltered, and a little bit messy, tend to stick. They create narratives, they shift attention, and they make people look closer than they were before. And once that happens, it's very hard to go back to normal. Because now, every move, every decision, every comment from this point forward is going to be viewed through a different lens. And if this really is the start of something bigger, then what we just saw might not have been random at all. But here, where the story really starts to shift. Because once that first comment went viral, it didn't stay isolated for long. It opened the door to a much bigger conversation, one that had clearly been building in the background. There's been a growing buzz online suggesting that this might not just be one player speaking out. Some fans believe it reflects a wider frustration that hasn't been fully visible until now. Not something officially confirmed, but something people are starting to piece together. And that's what makes it interesting. Because when a single comment starts lining up with things fans have already been questioning, decisions, rotations, player usage, it suddenly feels less random and more like a pattern. Now again, nothing here is proven. But the timing matters. Because this isn't happening mid-season after a tough loss. This is happening when things are supposed to be calm, when teams are preparing, resetting, and looking ahead, and instead you've got tension creeping into the conversation. That's unusual, and fans are picking up on it fast. There's been a wave of reactions online, with some people saying this is just overblown drama, while others are convinced it's a sign of deeper issues behind the scenes. And the more people talk about it, the more it feels like something that can't just be brushed off. Because once that idea of frustration enters the narrative, everything starts getting re-examined. Past decisions suddenly look different. Coaching choices that once seemed normal now raise questions. Even small moments, things that didn't stand out before, start to feel more important. That's how these situations grow. Not from one big revelation, but from a series of small signals that start to connect. And once fans begin connecting those dots, the story takes on a life of its own. Because now it's not just about what was said. It's about what it might mean. Is this just one player venting? Or is it the first glimpse into something that's been building quietly behind the scenes? That's the question driving everything right now. And until there's a clear answer, the speculation isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's probably just getting started. But to really understand why this situation is blowing up now, you have to go back to Cleveland. Because this isn't the first time Kevin Stefanski has been at the center of these kinds of conversations. During his time with the Browns, there were always two very different narratives. On one side, you had the official story, a coach trying to build structure, implement his system, and manage a roster with a lot of moving pieces. And to be fair, there were moments where that approach worked. But on the other side, there were questions. A lot of them. Fans constantly debated his decision-making, especially when it came to quarterbacks. Who was getting opportunities, who wasn't, and whether the offense was really being built around the players' strengths or forcing players to fit into a rigid system. And those debates didn't just come from fans. Analysts, former players, and media voices all had their own takes. Some defended Stefanski, saying he was dealing with a difficult situation. Others felt like certain decisions didn't fully add up. That divide never really went away. It just stayed in the background. Because every time the team showed flashes of success, the criticism would quiet down. But the moment things slipped, even slightly, it all came rushing back. And that's what makes the current situation feel familiar. Because now, people are starting to revisit those same conversations. The same questions about player usage. The same discussions about whether talent was being maximized or held back. And one name that keeps coming up in those discussions is Shedeur Sanders. There's been a lot of buzz, again, nothing confirmed, that he didn't always get the opportunities some expected. Some fans believed he could have had a bigger role. Others think the coaching staff had reasons that weren't fully visible from the outside. But regardless of which side you're on, the key point is this. The debate existed. And now it's resurfacing. Because when a new situation starts to show even small signs of similarity, people immediately connect it to the past. They start asking if what happened before might happen again. And that's exactly what's happening here. Because whether it's fair or not, Stefanski isn't walking into Atlanta with a clean slate in the eyes of the public. He's bringing a history with him. A history that some people believe deserves more context, and others believe explains everything. And until he proves otherwise on the field, those old conversations, they're not going anywhere. But the part of this story that's getting the most attention right now revolves around one name, Shedeur Sanders. Because whether you believe the hype or not, there's no denying this, Shedeur brings attention, a lot of it, and with that attention comes something else, constant debate. Now here, where things get interesting. There's been a lot of buzz online suggesting that Shedeur didn't always get the opportunities some fans expected. Not officially confirmed, not something the team has addressed directly, but enough talk that people have started questioning how things were handled. Some fans believe he should have had a bigger role. Others think the coaching staff had their reasons, whether it was system fit, timing, or simply trying to manage the situation differently behind the scenes. But either way, the conversation never really went away. It just stayed under the surface until now. Because once those recent comments started circulating, people immediately brought Shedeur back into the discussion. They started connecting dots, looking at past games, past decisions, and asking whether certain choices made sense in hindsight. And that's where the speculation really picked up. There's been talk that certain players were given more opportunities while others, like Shedeur, had to wait longer than expected. Again, nothing confirmed, just what fans are piecing together based on what they saw. But perception matters. Because once fans start believing a player wasn't fully utilized, it changes how they view everything else. Every snap, every substitution, every decision becomes part of a bigger story. And now, that same storyline is following Stefanski into a new situation. That's the key. Because this isn't just about what happened before, it's about what people think might happen next. When a coach becomes tied to a specific narrative, fair or not, it doesn't reset overnight. It carries over. So now, as things start fresh in Atlanta, fans aren't just watching the games, they're watching the decisions closely. Who gets reps, who gets opportunities, and whether the same patterns, real or perceived, start to show up again. Because if they do, then this conversation isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's only going to get louder. But here, where the conversation really shifts from the past day to what could happen next in Atlanta. Because a new team is supposed to mean a clean slate. New locker room, new players, new system. A chance to reset everything and move forward without old narratives following you. That's how it's supposed to work. But that's not exactly what's happening here. There's already a growing buzz around the Falcons' situation, and it's not coming from one big moment, it's coming from small signals that fans are starting to notice. Nothing confirmed, nothing officially addressed, but enough to get people talking. Because when a coach arrives with a history that's still being debated, fans don't just watch, they analyze closely. There's been speculation online that Atlanta could be walking into a situation similar to what Cleveland experienced. Again, just speculation, but the idea is gaining traction because people are paying attention to the details early. How players are being talked about, how roles are being described, how the team is approaching key positions, especially quarterback. And that's where the concern starts to build. Because the Falcons aren't just another rebuilding team, they've got expectations, talent, a roster that many believe can compete if things are handled the right way. So when even the possibility of instability enters the conversation, it gets amplified fast. Some fans believe this is being overblown, that a new environment will bring out a completely different result. Others aren't so sure. They think patterns don't just disappear, and they're watching to see if similar decisions start to show up again. That's the tension right now. Not panic, but awareness. Because if everything runs smoothly, if the system works, if players develop, if the team wins, then all of this disappears. The narrative resets and Stefanski gets credit for turning things around. But if things start off shaky, that's when the conversation explodes. Because now it's not just about one bad game or one tough stretch. It becomes, here we go again. And once that phrase enters the discussion, it's incredibly hard to stop it. That's why Atlanta is such a key part of this story. Because this isn't just another stop for a coach, it's a test. A chance to prove that what happened before was situational, not a pattern. And until that's proven on the field, fans are going to keep watching every move, every decision, and every outcome. Because in their eyes, this isn't just a fresh start. It's a moment of truth. But here's the part that might decide everything: the quarterback competition. Because Kevin Stefanski has made one thing very clear: nobody is being handed a starting job. On the surface, that sounds like the perfect approach. Competition pushes players, it creates urgency, it forces everyone to earn their role instead of relying on reputation or hype. In theory, that's exactly what you want. But not everyone sees it that way. There's been a growing debate around whether constant competition, especially at the quarterback position, is actually helpful or quietly risky. Some fans believe this is the right move. They argue that the best quarterbacks rise under pressure, that if you can't win the job outright, you probably weren't ready to lead the team anyway. In that view, competition isn't chaos, it's clarity. But others aren't convinced. There's been speculation that too much uncertainty at quarterback can actually slow development. That instead of building confidence, it creates hesitation. Instead of giving one player full control of the offense, it splits focus, splits reps, and sometimes leaves no one fully settled. And that's where the concern starts to grow. Because if this turns into a true back-and-forth battle where reps are constantly shifting, roles are constantly changing, it could impact more than just the depth chart. It could affect rhythm, timing, leadership inside the locker room. Now again, nothing here is guaranteed. Plenty of teams run competitions and come out stronger. It can work if it's handled the right way. But the reason this situation feels different is because of everything surrounding it. The existing narratives, the questions from the past, the attention on certain players. All of that adds pressure to what would normally be a standard coaching decision. Because now, every move in that quarterback room is going to be watched closely. Who gets more reps? Who gets pulled early? Who gets trusted in key moments? And if those decisions start raising questions, that's when the conversation shifts again. Because what starts as healthy competition can quickly get labeled as something else entirely, fair or not. And that's why this part of the story matters so much. Because if Stefanski gets this right, it could silence a lot of the noise. It could prove that competition builds strength, not confusion. But if it goes the other way, then this quarterback battle won't just define the offense. It might define the entire season. But here's the question that's splitting everyone right now. Is this actually a pattern, or are people just overreacting? Because depending on who you ask, you'll get two completely different answers. On one side, there are fans who believe this is being blown way out of proportion. They see a coach stepping into a new situation, trying to establish control, create competition, and build a system from the ground up. To them, everything we're seeing right now is normal. New team, new structure, new expectations. Of course, there's going to be noise. They argue that every coach gets criticized, especially early on. And when you combine social media reactions with old narratives from previous teams, it's easy for things to spiral into something bigger than they actually are. In their eyes, this isn't a pattern. It's just pressure. But then there's the other side. The group that believes this feels too familiar to ignore. They point to past situations, past decisions, the same types of conversations happening again about player usage, quarterback handling, and overall direction. And to them, it doesn't feel random. It feels consistent. Now again, nothing here is officially confirmed. No one inside the organization is saying there's a problem. There's no direct evidence proving anything beyond what's happening publicly. But perception doesn't need confirmation to grow. Because once fans start noticing similarities, even small ones, they begin connecting dots. And once those dots start forming a picture, it becomes very hard to convince people it's just coincidence. That's where this situation sits right now. Right in the middle. Not clearly a problem, but not completely dismissed either. And that's what makes it so interesting. Because the truth hasn't been decided yet. It's still being written. Every game, every decision, every move from this point forward is going to shape which side ends up being right. The ones who think this is just noise, or the ones who believe they've seen this before. And that's why people are watching so closely. Because this isn't just about what's already happened. It's about what happens next. And whether that next chapter confirms the doubts, or completely shuts them down. And when you step back and look at everything, the comments, the speculation, the past conversations, and the current situation, it all leads to one simple but uncomfortable question. What if this isn't random at all? Because that's what makes this story so interesting right now. It's not built on one moment, it's built on layers, a comment here, a decision there, a pattern that some people believe they're starting to recognize. Now, to be fair, none of this is confirmed. There's no official statement saying anything is wrong, no clear evidence that something is happening behind the scenes. Everything we're seeing is based on reactions, observations, and what people think they're connecting. But sometimes perception becomes the story. Because once fans start looking at things differently, everything changes, every decision gets questioned, every move gets analyzed, Even normal situations start to feel like they mean more than they do. And that's exactly where things are right now. This isn't a full-blown controversy. But it's not nothing either. It's that middle ground, the space where questions exist but answers don't. And in that space, speculation grows fast. Because if everything runs smoothly from here, this entire situation disappears. The noise fades, the narrative resets, and this becomes just another off-season moment that didn't really mean anything. But if things don't go smoothly, that's when everything we've talked about comes rushing back. The comments, the doubts, the idea that maybe something bigger was there all along. And that's why this moment matters. Because we're not just watching what's happening, we're watching what it could turn into. So as the season approaches, don't just focus on the headlines. Watch the details. Watch how decisions are made, watch how players are used, watch how the team responds under pressure. Because that's where the real answers are going to come from. And when those answers finally show up, we'll know for sure. Was this all just noise? Or the first sign of something much bigger?